I want to say something that I said on the quad when we were under umbrellas, and say it here as well. Sorry if I'm saying it again to those of you who were there. But I had a conversation before I knew that this appointment was in peril with the Chancellor. And by then, we were getting wind that there were people who were unhappy with the decision by American Indian Studies to appoint Steven to this position. I asked Chancellor Wise in that conversation. She had asked to have a conversation with me, and I knew it was about Steven's personal Twitter account. I asked her very clearly during that conversation, did you read the entirety of that Twitter account? She indicated by saying that from what she had read numerous times in that conversation, that she hadn't. I said, you know, there are people in your office who know how to access an entire Twitter account. I hope you will avail yourself of seeing at least the last month of all of those tweets. I know people in your office, I've met them, I know that they can show you the entirety of what's been done in the last month. If you want to see all the way back in time, don't tell me you don't have a Twitter account. The whole point of Twitter is anybody can go back and see the public Twitter account. You can see every single thing that Steven's ever written on his Twitter account. You can see what I've written on my Twitter account. Anybody who puts it up there who hasn't edited it out, you can see it. But she said, the things that I've been reading lead me to say that this is unacceptable for a faculty member at the University of Illinois to say. Say, well, maybe you need, as I said often, not often enough, but it keeps coming into my mind, you can make up your mind about any issue based on as little information as you'd like. I always encourage people to dig just a little bit deeper than that, and as deep as they're able, as often as possible. And to keep trying and to keep learning. To keep learning from the example of our students who are teachers in this teachable moment, I think, and then learning more and teaching us in helping us to see that it's worth continuing to fight for things that are right, standing up to power, and telling those in power that just because they have power doesn't mean they're the only people that matter. Yeah. I've been in conversations like those with people who are chancellors, college presidents, who I first worked for a college president when I was an undergraduate at Peppermint University out in California. That I've learned in having conversations with people who are presidents and chancellors that they get to decide what we talk about, whether it's on an airplane or in a car or in their office, on the phone. They get to kind of lead the conversation. But I thought, given that this was going to be a conversation, no doubt, about Steven Salaita, that the conversation was going to turn around to teaching at some point. So I got all of the things we gathered about Steven's teaching, things that he had put together so that we put his tenure file together. We could examine what kind of teacher he would likely be. And in that file we had teaching evaluations, we had the different sorts of things you put together when you do the sort of vetting that you do for this sort of thing. And I had it all in front of me on my two screens at home that I look at when I'm working at home, and I thought, okay, when the Chancellor brings this up, when she says to me, Robert, I need to know, what kind of teacher will Steven be? We never had that conversation. Instead, she told me during this conversation what kind of teacher she had decided that Steve Salaita would be, based on some tweets that she had been sent by people who had an agenda that she wanted to tell me about. Now, so I have my notes from that conversation. I know she takes notes on every conversation she has. Maybe our notes don't match up, but I have my version, she has her version. And I know that she talked to the board the next day. At that point, she never told me that this appointment was in peril. But she did tell me she wanted me to tell Steven Salaita some things. She told me to tell him that his social media presence would be monitored to make sure that he was not using university equipment on university time, on university property to say things like he had said, and that she found what he said to be unacceptable. That we live in a town where we have to shop together, at Target and Sam's Club, and we have to follow a different set of rules here in little Champaign, Urbana. Still don't quite know what that means. But it was something she wanted me to convey to him, which I did in a very embarrassed fashion on that following Saturday night, after I thought that all of this had passed, and that he'd be joining us in a couple of weeks. I asked her in that conversation, I said, I'm willing to say those things in some fashion to Steve Salaita, that you're, as long as I get to say that they're from you, not from me, and that I disagree with them. If you'll at least say to me, I hope that you'll say that you can't insist on anything with the Chancellor. I've also found out. I hope, Chancellor Wise, that you will have a face-to-face conversation with Steve Salaita someday, where you can have this conversation with him. Because I know that if you ever do sit down with him face-to-face, you will find him to be, as I have known him to be for many, many years, a person who is engaging, who is deeply concerned with all of the things you're talking about, who cares about what other people think, who would never step into a classroom to try to impose an agenda on other people, who wants students to learn, to be critical thinkers, to be wonderful citizens of the world. The last thing that I'll say before I make way for the next speaker, Michael Rothberg, is to say, this is kind of an inside baseball kind of thing that my fellow faculty members out there will maybe understand. I remember looking at Steven's record in his curriculum vitae, and as an administrator, I saw one item in it where I said, oh, thank goodness. Steven's colleagues in English at Virginia Tech had put him in charge of a program there for the undergraduate English program, where they had to kind of go through the drill of learning how to be an English major. And so his colleagues had put him in charge of that. And it made me think like, oh, finally we have somebody who knows what they're doing with the curriculum. And this is finally somebody that I can turn to say, he'll be able to take our curriculum, and I'll put him in charge of that committee. And this was a signal to me of the person who would be collegial, who would know how to run a committee like that. You only put people in charge of committees like that when they actually are excellent teachers who can say to the people around the room, no, we're going to do this because this is what works in the classroom. All of this is to say to you, this is a person who we're missing right now as a teacher.